Hey folks, welcome to the Business of Story. Park Howell here. I'm your host and author of the new book, Brand Bewitchery: How to Wield the Story Cycle System to Craft Spellbinding Stories for Your Brand. You can grab your copy right now on Amazon or Apple Books. Today, we explore the trifecta of artificial intelligence, human storytelling, and a higher power to make your sales pipeline explode, but in a good way. But first, my story marketing moment. The greatest single paradigm shift I've been witnessing in chief marketing officers, content creators, and leaders when they learn to apply storytelling in their business is that, dun dun dun, spoiler alert, you and your brand are not the center of your story. Your audiences and customers are. You play an even more important role of mentor or guide to help them get what they want on their journey. When you go through the story cycle system to craft your brand narrative, the first 5 steps are all about understanding and empathizing with your customers and what they want out of life. Then you get to chapter 6, which I call the mentor. This is all about you because it's here that you get to define your authentic personality and how you, your product or service, and your team are uniquely equipped to help your customers get what they want out of life. So the next time you tell a story about your brand, place your audience at the center of your story and witness how you captivate them like you never have before. We'll explore this theme today in what our guest calls the ICP, your ideal customer profile, and why it's fruitless to market to anyone else but your ideal customer. And what's the catch here? You gotta understand and empathize with them first, and of course, place them at the center of your story. Joining you and I today is Chad Burmeister, CEO of ScaleX.ai. He shares how to use AI to better understand your customers and deliver the right sales stories at the right time to exponentially grow your brand and business.
I'm not about trying to make the deal as big as I can. I'm about what are your goals? What are your objectives? And now let's line the right gear and guide and fishing in the fishing analogy to get you the most fish at the lowest cost money, right?
But Chad brings us so much more. This is a wide-ranging conversation that models business storytelling and the metaphors and analogies Chad shares to make his business points. He's a heck of a storyteller. He's a believer, husband, father of 2 teenagers, and self-described lifelong rebel and rule breaker. His mission is to empower sales professionals to become the best versions of themselves by focusing on their mindset, skill set, and tool set. Chad hosts the AI for Sales webinar and podcast on the Sales Expert channel and C-Suite Radio, and is a sought-after speaker sharing systems and processes needed to become the greatest sales professional in the world. Dun, dun, dun. So please welcome to the Business of Story, Chad Burmeister. Hey, Chad, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
So, the funnel world, as I call it, a world that is still alien to me after 35 years of being in the advertising, branding, marketing world, making the move over to digital, and I fumble with my funnel all the time. And I don't know that I might be minimizing what we're going to be talking about today of just the funnel world. But when I did my research on the work you guys do over there, that was my take on it. So before we get into your backstory, can you share with our listeners what's the biggest mistake we all make when we're reaching out to potential customers?
Man, the biggest mistake that people make in building a pipeline is multi-channel. They tend to choose a channel that they're comfortable with, and they forget that there are multiple other techniques and channels that you can use to build a pipeline. That's it.
So for instance, if I've got my Facebook group, I'm just totally focused on that Facebook group. I'm not getting much action on it. I curse digital marketing and funnel development when I should be looking at a different channel.
Yeah, right. And it's funny because Facebook is an example of one that I wasn't using until 3 months ago. So a marketer in my neighborhood was introduced to me. We started working together, and he said, "Look, you can go find people who are following Elon Musk or Madonna, or you can get extremely specific on Facebook." And I was like, but wait, I usually go choose the person that meets my ideal customer profile or ICP. I download them as a list. I call them, I email them, I connect with them on social. I might send them a Vidyard video. So I'm doing all these other 4 or 5. I might even send them a physical letter. And I didn't know about this mighty channel called Facebook ads. And now I do. So that's the point, right? Is why use one channel when you can use them all?
It is confusing out there. And because we have such a deluge of channels to choose from, it's hard to know which one's right and which one's wrong. And I guess that's what we are going to explore on today's show. But first, Chad, your backstory. How in the world did you find yourself in the position you are today?
The story that comes to mind is that when I was probably 3 or 4, I was running around in Colorado Springs. We'd just moved from Wisconsin to Colorado, which I call myself a Colorado native these days, even though I'm a cheesehead by birth. And so I was walking around the living room wearing those pajamas that, cover your toes and feet and a bodysuit kind of thing. And I remember with this popcorn popper thing that goes pop, 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 pop. And I ran into the wall. And my point of that is that I was so curious that I wanted to explore the world. I've gone through life kind of always wanting to explore. And that's where it all started. I became super uber competitive as a teenager, whether it was lacrosse or swim meets or soccer, didn't matter what it was. I was just a competitor. And I learned first to fifth grade, I was the rope climb master. So literally nobody beat me for all 6 years because Tim Trelfa was the gym coach. And to this day, he's connected with me on Facebook. I would go to the same church and he'd come up to me and go, "Hey, Chad, good news. Nobody's beat your record yet." So that's what I learned at a very early age, is that I'm curious about the world and I'm competitive.
We have those two traits in common, curiosity and competitiveness, but I couldn't climb that damn rope for the life of me. I was this skinny, weak little dude. And man, I would get a third of the way up and then have to jump off. And you know what happens if that rope gets swinging in that knot at the bottom of that rope? You got to make sure you jump appropriately. What is the secret to being the rope climbing champion?
I wasn't even a very strong kid either. I just was hyper competitive, and I think I used my legs a little more than most, right? So you pull up, and I think I had a strategy that I used every time. So it'd be up, legs, and 3 seconds up, and somebody else would be 12 seconds. The other interesting thing was that they had a pegboard in the gym, and so I always thought of this. There's one pegboard here, and there's another pegboard to the right of it.
These are the ones you climb with, where you
Yeah,
put
with
the peg in the wall and
little
you move
pegs in the
across?
wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I always thought, what pegboard am I on in life at any given time? And one pegboard went higher than the other one. And so I was always like thinking, am I on the right pegboard of where I'm supposed to be in life? Or what if I just move over 2 feet over, that pegboard goes a lot higher. So whether you're a rep or an inside sales rep, an SDR, a BDR, a manager, a director, a VP, it was always to me, how do I make it to the highest end of the pegboard?
SDR, senior
Sales development representative,
BDR.
business development representative.
What was the other acronym you threw in there?
In ISR is an inside sales representative.
There we go. All right, folks, we're cleared up here. As I mentioned, this is as new to me as to you listeners out there. It's not new. The concept is there, but I just have not been able to figure it out. So how do you know when to switch pegboards?
I remember in an MBA that I did at UC Irvine. Well, I did the MBA at Loyola Marymount University. In the class, the professor was a operations COO type, and he drew a circle on the board, a circle on the top and a circle on the bottom. And at the top, it was a big circle. On the bottom, it was a little circle. And then as you went further to the right, the big circle on the top became smaller. right? So big circle, a little smaller, a little smaller. On the bottom, it was a little circle and became bigger on the right. If you can envision, when you're new to a role and you're at the bottom of the pegboard, you're a little circle. The higher up the pegboard you get, you become a bigger circle. That knowledge from the top, the person who's trained you in that specific role or your work in that role, helps you move up the pegboard. Once you're at the top of the pegboard, the way he described it was within 18 to 24 months in a job, you will learn 80 to 90% of what you will ever learn within that job. And so I always found myself at the low end of the curve. In 18 months, I'm like, I already know 80% of this. What's my next, right? What do I need to go do next to continue to build a bigger circle? So that's how you know if you're at the top of the pegboard. And I've seen people stay at the top of the pegboard for their entire lives. And that's just not exciting to me at all.
They get comfortable.
Yeah.
You know, when you're talking about sales, I've got a good friend, and he says that his sales team has the same challenge, and I guess it's true with maybe all sales teams, is that the guy in his business, because they're all guys selling to guys, basically, they move up the pegboard, as you're talking about. They get to the top of that one pegboard where they're like, you know, I'm making some really good money. I'm working about 30 hours a week now. I got this dialed in, and really that's all I need. And then the sales director has to come in and go, well, we need much more from you. So we're going to split up your market and have you rebuild what you had there to keep going. Is that kind of what you're talking about, where we run into this complacency of success? And like, we're at the top of this pegboard. Yeah, I could put the effort in to climb this other one, but you know what? Not really into it.
Yeah. And I'm in a top of pegboard situation right now. I built the company. It's been 2.5 years, maybe close to 3 in December. And I'm on cruise control, right? The growth is there. The cash flow's coming in. The costs are going down while the revenues are going up. It's a nice chart, and it would be really easy to sit back and say, great, let me just keep doing the things that I've done, because why break it? If it's not broke, don't fix it. And yet at the same time, my level of needing to always move to a bigger pegboard is that important to me. So it seems to me that now, as CEO running a company and actually co-founder of another company, I'm now starting to figure out, okay, what's the next pegboard that helps more people in their spirituality? And it's one that it's been very unexplored in my lifetime, but I feel compelled over the past year or two to figure out, what is that calling, right? I'm being called to play on another pegboard, and I just don't know what it is.
Well, let's explore that pegboard here in a second. But as I experienced often in high school gym class, falling off that freaking pegboard, I climbed it about as well as I did the ropes. Have you had that challenge in business? Have you fallen off the pegboard and found yourself laying flat on your back? And if so, how'd you overcome it?
Yeah. So my COVID-19 was in March of 2019. It was before the actual pandemic actually hit America, because I had been doing $100,000 to $200,000 a month in sales. I'd built a team around that level of delivery, and we're not funded. So we didn't have any resources to get to should that not happen. And we did $30,000 in a month, 28,000 to be exact. And
what happened? What was the cause
you
of
could hear the thump on the ground when I hit it. I mean, it was scary. And what happened is I had to take inventory, slow things down, and see the world, and take one foot in front of the other. So what that looked like for me and my wife was that I work at home, so I didn't come home I'd walk out of my office at 7 at night, and we actually would work on puzzles. So we started with a 500-piece puzzle, we moved to 1,000, we moved to a 2,000, and it just got my mind out of the stressor to where I could focus on something else. And we'd spend an hour to 3 hours a night and just have Tracy and Chad time. Now, in the day, I had mentors, Alice Hyman, who comes from the Miller Hyman family. It's the daughter of Mr. Hyman. And so Alice is a very good influencer.
I don't know the Hyman family.
Miller Hyman is the biggest sales training organization in the world. They've rolled up every real sales training company that had been out there over the course of about 10 years. And they were the originals, right? That's
Okay.
customer-centered selling and things you may have heard of in the sales world. So she's my mentor. And then I have another gentleman named Matt McDarby, who was with one of the best sales training orgs in the world, Gerhard, and a marketer, and a team of about 9 very, very good advisors that I could go and say, hey, when I'm not doing puzzles at night to take my mind off of things, what should I be focused on to right the ship? And they gave me so much power that now I'm just living in a totally different mindset than I was a year ago in March of 2019.
So this is your company, ScaleX.ai,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
And you're now telling us you're at the top of the pegboard. You were at the bottom of the pegboard just over a year ago, not that long ago. What caused that precipitous drop off in sales from 200,000 plus a month to 30?
Good question. I think it's just the ebbs and flows of business. You have to plan for it, right? And now there's one compelling event though. This was interesting. There's a guy named Gabe who was with a company that sells a software platform that requires heavy human labor to operate it. And my product requires light human labor to operate it. Well, he picked a fight with me on social media, and clearly we won the fight because we signed 42 deals, which normally we were signing 10 or 12 deals in a quarter, but they were $30,000 to $50,000 each. Now we signed 42 deals that were between $2,000 and $6,000. So we got all this influx of demand that wasn't in our ICP. It was a new product. And
ICP.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier, ideal customer profile.
There you go. Okay. I must have missed that.
Ideal
ICP.
customer
Thank you.
profile. So they didn't meet our ideal customer profile because our ideal customer profile is a funded startup who's just gotten money and they have to grow faster than is reasonable. And so they come to us and say, hey, we need the accelerate button. And that's what we do. We help accelerate companies' outbound sales processes to build a pipeline faster than they could otherwise. Well, now all these companies are coming in that are not funded. They're like, yeah, we agree. We want to do this too. And I'm like, yeah, it's $7,000 a month for 3 months. That's $21K. Whoa, that's what I pay myself. You mean I need to fire myself? And I'm like, well, maybe we could make this $500 product fit for you for 3 months for $1,500. Great. Send me the credit card form. I'll sign up. And they had expectations of the $7,000 product that generates 10 to 30 meetings a month for the $500 product. And they're like, wait, your advertising said you do 10 to 30 meetings a month. I'm like, yeah, that's for 7,000, not for 500. For 500, you'll get 2 to 3 meetings a month. You might get 0. Oh, right. And so we had a whole slew that took the time from my sales team, myself, my delivery people. So 42 sounded good on paper, but it actually was a time bomb that caused us to have a very bad March.
Because you had to go in customer service and take care of all these people and reframe their expectations of what they were going to get for the $500.
Exactly. And by the way, we paid you on our credit card, and credit cards have a way of saying, oh yeah, they're challenging that and they claw it back for a period of 30 for 45 days. Now it's a hardened contract, right? There's no refunds, no exchange. But from a cash flow perspective, when all of a sudden you have 3 or 4 of those that claw back in a month, it was just not a fun month.
It bites. So you are trying to find a way to make it work for everybody, but it wasn't your ideal customer. And then therefore being the nice guys, giving them the $500 option, it just didn't deliver of what they expected. Then it's that whole thing of good Samaritans, no good deed goes unpaid or whatever. You had to go back and fix it all.
Yeah.
So you overcame that, it sounds like, and you guys are doing well now because you're at the top of the pegboard with ScaleX.ai.
Well, what happened is we found a different provider that could do the $500 product because we partner largely. And so our team of technical experts find the right product, help you implement it. We do it all under the ScaleX logo, but we find engineers who've already built something and went to market with it. So we swapped out vendor A and moved it to vendor B, and boom, now we had a product that fit the $500 a month market. Now I was like, okay, got it. We solved that problem.
I
So,
love your pegboard analogy because I could just now picturing you moving, horizontally across the pegboard and not slipping off to find that new provider so you could go up again.
yes. Well, now think of this. Here's where it gets very interesting. Traditionally, it's me on the pegboard. So I can only be on one board at a time. What I learned in February of this year at a CEO event at Baldface Lodge in Canada, it's a skier's paradise and more so a snowboarder's paradise. 70% of the people are boarders. We had 48 CEOs, and Jamie Shanks is a friend of mine. He's a CEO, and he was always thinking, I want to be a CEO of more than just one company. And his mentor, his main mentor said, no, you can't do that. You have to be the CEO of one. Well, that's because he's the CEO of a company that's funded. And so it's a board. And the board tells him, no, you're captive to us. Well, all of these 48 entrepreneurs, we would talk at dinner to them. Hey, can you be the CEO or at least an investor in multiple companies? They're like, absolutely. One guy had a piece of 100 companies. His advice was you need to pick the jockey on the horse to run in the race. So in my pegboard analogy, here's Chad on this pegboard, but now I've got a person, Dion is running salesclass.ai. She's the CEO. And I have a percentage ownership in that business. That's the second one, right? How many more pegboards can you spin the plate on and have a vision and say, here's the vision, cookie cutter, all the work we did and all the lessons we learned in that bad month. How do we avoid something like that? Spin up a lot of plates and have multiple pegboards going at the same time. That's where I'm kind of excited with the next level.
That's awesome. Can you explain what you all do there at ScaleX.ai and how are you different? I mean, what is your position in the marketplace that makes you a go-to provider?
Sure. On the back of my business card, it says, we wrote the book on AI for sales. So that's artificial intelligence in sales. ScaleX uses technology to do the menial work that a human doesn't really enjoy doing and frankly isn't very good at. We're leveraging AI, which happens to be about 75% of what a sales development representative, SDR, and a business development representative, BDR,
Thank you.
does. And so if you can automate the tasks that they don't actually want to be doing, pulling research from the internet, sending an email, sending a social connection, and then enabling them to spend 75%. Now they get to spend 75% of their time on the telephone talking to prospects. That's a 300% increase in time spent doing work that's meaningful versus spending time spent on work that's very menial and has very little value.
I always think of AI as being extraordinarily impersonal. So how do you, in being the business of story here, we're always about humanizing the brand. So how do you use AI in the sale funnel and make it sound not like a robot, not like I'm being spammed, but like there's actually a human being on the other end of that?
That's the game. And it's making it appear human and not just appear, but be. So I'll give you an example. Nick Cavuto works with me from a marketing perspective. And he helped us build videos, get us on podcast. He's done a lot of work with us. And so he started reaching out to find other people to coach, right? He calls himself a pastor of entrepreneurs. And he started as a real pastor. Now he's a pastor of entrepreneurs. And so he uses the platform to automate LinkedIn outreach, and he uses emojis, right? The clapping emoji is the very first thing at the beginning. The word I'm doesn't have capital apostrophe M. It has I am. He has 3 or 4 dots with a space between one of the dots. So it's typo upon typo, but it's heartfelt. It's a one-to-many that could be viewed as spam if it wasn't written in the way it's written. But if you know Nick is heartfelt. He does want to get in front of that exact persona and build a personal connection. So his whole ask is, the clapping hands, let's get in front of you. You seem like a really interesting person. I'd really like to get to know you. And so it's heartfelt, warm, but it's a one-to-many. he didn't have to sit there and go in and type that 1,000 times a day. Why would he do that? Be an utter waste of his time. He booked 6 meetings in the first day that he clicked the go button. And so now where it comes in the human play is that when someone comes back and goes, oh, this is a great message, he'll then do a video. Now that they're a hand raiser, he'll do a quick 5, 10, 20-second video. Hey, it's Nick. I'm really looking forward to getting in touch with you and having a business conversation. Thanks so much for responding. And he'll be sitting at the fire pit or wherever. He'll add humanization at the second part of the process rather than to all 1,000 that don't even care about it.
Interesting. So the AI is just really activating, elevating that human touch. You sit down and you have to write this stuff out. So you've got to let your humanity flow and show in that. And I just love the fact of where we are in this day and age of the mind-boggling technology that we have to make us look smarter. And how do you cut through? You have bumbling typos like you would expect to get in a text. So you're not dumbing it down. You're
AI makes you look dumber.
Right. I love that. So then in your process, do you also help people ferret out which channels they need to be on and to what percentage? And maybe they just need to be email, or it's a combination of email, Facebook groups, Facebook ads, blah, blah, blah. I mean, do you guys go and do that whole thing?
Yeah. Since we've deployed 200 or more customers now, we have a pretty good idea if you're selling product A, B, or C, or it's this market you're selling into healthcare hospitals, for example. If you try to call them over the last 6 months during the pandemic, it's about 100 or 200 to 1 dial to connect rate, meaning 200 calls to finally get one doctor. So if we use automation for that, but it still could be an hour or 2-hour wait time to talk to the next person. If you're manually dialing, forget about it. 200 dials is going to take you 2 to 3 days, maybe even a week to complete 200 dials. So you probably aren't going to do the dials. What you are going to do is record a video at the bottom on a Loom or a Vidyard that says, hey, I've been doing some research on your company. In fact, here's a screen share. Congrats on your MD status. You've been doing this for 24 years. That's awesome. Most of my family's in medical, by the way. But when I searched for anesthesiology in Highlands Ranch, you don't even show up on the first page. So, hey, my company for $99 a month can help you get better reviews from your patients and show up on the first page. Instead of trying to get that person on the phone, sending them a Vidyard or a Loom video through email and or social, LinkedIn, now you can get a much higher reply rate. So just knowing what channels work, it's kind of like going fishing. If you've ever gone deep sea fishing, man, you try to do that yourself. you don't know to put the flashers on. We didn't know that till day 3. And then they go, oh, you guys aren't using we caught like 2 or 3 fish. And we came back, they're like, oh yeah, you guys didn't even catch any of the good fish. You caught a bunch of pinks. You need to catch the good ones, the king salmon. Use this flasher. And then when we use the flasher, we just started slaying fish. I look at it like the channels are the different lines in the water. One's at depth, one's on the surface, one's in the middle, one's deep. And then what's the flasher? What's the bait? How does all that look? It's complex these days. And if you don't have a partner that can help you sort through what bait to use and make sure to clip on the flasher before, then you're probably going to fail.
So, Chad, I'm going to go fishing, and you are my guide. Let me ask you: say I show up and I'm interested in your service, and I tell you, "Hi, Park Howell, Business of Story. I've got an online course, but I'm going to do a hybrid, and I'm going to put together a 3-week live class, only 10 people, 10 professionals, 10 brand, purpose-driven brand leaders can participate because we want to keep it a tight, intimate community. I'm going to do a live training session on Tuesday and then a live Q&A show your work session on Thursday. In the course of 3 weeks, 6 live sessions, we are going to completely dial in your brand story and give you the skills to tell it, show you where to find your stories and how to communicate that. And I'm going to be using my online course, the live training, my textbook, Brand Bewitchery that came out over the summer, my workbook, and of course, my little field guide. And as a bonus to all of this, you will be able to share your story on our blog, how it all came together, and we're going to feature it. And we're going to pull out 2 or 3 students and feature you on the podcast so that you get a chance to launch your new story to the world. Big offering. I'm hoping it's like that Ginsu knife salesman. It's so full of bonuses that people would be silly not to take advantage of it. And it's very personal, small cohort, me teaching it live. Now, I've got about a 5,000 person mailing list. I've got a growing 2,000 person Facebook group for Business of Story. And I've got my Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitter, and I'm spread too thin between all of those. And so I bring this challenge to you. What is the first question or the first 2 or 3 things that I should be thinking about in pulling together a program like you're talking about that I could use AI to see if I can't fill those seats?
Sure. Well, remember those 3 letters, ICP. Do you remember what they stand for?
The ideal customer profile.
Exactly.
Boom.
Boom. A plus. So out of the 5,000, I would first ask the question of those 5,000, which ones meet your ideal customer profile? It's likely that over time you've collected a list of people that, maybe not. I mean, you could probably look down the list and say, yeah, that guy's been doing business for 5 years and never sold a thing. Or that guy raised $1 million and sold $12,000. Yeah, I don't know if I want to help him tell that story because I just don't know if he can get out of his own way. So somebody told me early, he was the former head of Keyhole Maps, which was bought by Google Maps. So Dave told me, Chad, my recommendation for you in your career is to find the rocket ships that have already left the launch pad, because he goes, then you can be a B plus or an A minus and you're going to look like an A plus plus. And so if I use that analogy to help you narrow down to your ideal customer profile, it would be probably helpful to find people like me that are already went from 300,000 to 1.2 to $2 million because the rocket's already off the pad. And therefore, there's probably a little bit more budget when the rocket's off the pad. And by the way, some of that budget was probably allocated to physical in-person events that's now no longer happening in the world. So how do you take the 5,000, slice down to the piece of the pie that's the 100 or 500 that you want to go after? Then you go across the channels to reach out to those people. A voicemail drop is super simple. You could do a voicemail drop to 1,000 of the 5,000 for pennies on the dollar. Imagine getting that voicemail in a Business of Story kind of way. You're going to get callbacks like crazy. And that'll cost you maybe $50 to do 1,000 voicemails to those people. And that's what we try to do. Is I'm not about trying to make the deal as big as I can. I'm about, what are your goals? What are your objectives? And now let's line the right gear and guide and fishing, in the fishing analogy, to get you the most fish at the lowest cost money, right?
And I suppose too, you could have different ICPs for different offerings. So you've got that rocket ship has left. We only need 10 of these folks in there. Boom. Now I'm going to do one for consultants because I know that they fight with what their brand story is, and they're a dime a dozen, so they don't stand out. So I could go after a completely different ICP with that particular group.
Yeah, right. Maybe one's mostly online. The one you explained over 3 weeks is part online. It's a big package, right? That's a bigger deal. You could say, hey, for the online piece, it's $499. It's self-serve, and that's a whole different market. And that's what we found with the $500 product, was that I was winning about 25% of the conversations we were in, but I was walking away from another 25%.
Yep. So I guess it comes down to what we always preach here, and that is know your audience.
That's
and
right.
the ICP, and then that helps determine your channels, your frequency, your messaging, and so forth. So
Yeah,
no different there. Well, let's now move across the pegboard and up to this new thing you've got going: spirituality, mindfulness, helping business leaders really find their place in the world. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I went to this conference in San Diego called Rich Litvin, and it was the Litvin Intensive for 4 days. And he's a former high school teacher turned mindset expert that has coached some of the most amazing people in the world. And so I got a golden ticket invite and I had no idea what I was signing up for. But remember, curious. I'm a curious guy. So I'm like, yeah, get me on a plane, get me out of the house. Let's go. And so in the first night, I was like, this is what I thought I was going to be. I thought we were going to get something out of the box. You sit across from another person. Okay, tell me about this. And then you coach them for 3 minutes. And then you move and you move and you move and you end up coaching 100 different people. And I'm like, well, I'm not really a coach. Well, it turns out I actually am because I've been coaching salespeople for my whole life. And so I actually was quite good at it that night. I'm like, okay, this is cool. I'm good at this. Well, the next day it's like, yeah, all that stuff that you did last night, that's not what we're going to do. I just want to show you what most people do and tell you that's incorrect and there's a better way. So for 3 days, he demonstrated this simple concept. He'd get up and he'd say, who wants to be coached by me? And then, some people have an alligator arm, some people have their arm really high, and then somebody would get picked. And he would spend 8 to 12 minutes asking almost the same set of questions, depending on where it went. But it started like this. What was your passion in college? What did you do? What was your major? Take me back to college. Oh, I was in Arizona. I went to Arizona State. I was a swimmer, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. Now let's go back to age 6. What was your passion then? And they'd come out. And what he would expose in these 8 to 12 minute conversations is you're either in perfect alignment with what your life's purpose is, or you're not. And the impact that our teachers have, our pastors have, our parents, our brothers and sisters, anyone we interact with, from the time we're the kid climbing up that rope, winning for 6 years in a row, to the time we are today, you could have been told a lie about where you should or should not be in life. And helping people see and understand that the lie either exists or doesn't is what I've really been practicing now. I've done about 100 podcasts / webinars, and it's called AI for Sales. And we very rarely get into the AI part of the conversation. We stay at the tell me about college, tell me about what you did when you were 6. And people have these aha flip moments that they're like, oh, wow. And it usually goes back to mommy and daddy problems when they're kids. I had one and it wasn't bad compared to a lot of people. Mine was pretty lightweight, but it felt big for me at the time. And it was dad didn't come to swim meets and soccer games and lacrosse games. Did he really love me? Didn't say he loved me because he's from the Midwest. You don't say that to a boy in the family. My sister, I knew he loved her because he was all over her. I love you, Lindsay. I love you. And so that was a gap for me that caused me to always want to move up the pegboard to be able to say, Dad, I'm on a higher pegboard than you now. Do you see me now? And so understanding and realizing that now looking back, you can go, wow, that's the fire that lit me. Thank goodness for that, because no matter if it was something as funny as that sounds, but it was big for me and it lit the fire for 2 decades, 3 decades of learning and selling and being a competitive driven person. But now getting to go to 30,000 feet and look down on that and say, oh, wow, that was a story that I told myself. How do I unwind that story? So then I read the 4-pager to my dad that I wrote while I was at that conference. It took me 6 weeks to get the nerve up to go do it. I thought I was going to do it right after I got off the airplane. But that was a life-changing moment. So now when I get to meet with people and I go, take them to the college, take them to the age 6 and get to unwind that, it's like 10 times out of 10, maybe 9.9 being honest, but very, very high rate of people that just, I call it flipping the pancake, right? It's been on one side for 40 years in a lot of cases. And when you get to see it flip over, the aha moment happens and you just unlock something that's amazing. Chiropractic of the mind is what I think of it as.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. What percentage of people do you work with do you feel are living the wrong story until they go through a process like this?
Hmm. It seems to me that it's as high as 90 to 95%. Now, I think there's 50% that are close to where they should be, maybe even 60% that are close. But just like me living on the pegboard, to truly get in alignment with the proper purpose for my life requires thinking and meditating and mentors and it's not just a one-time chiropractic 12-minute session. The 12-minute thing that he did so brilliantly, I'm sure he's using NLP and all kinds of tactics to get people to truly flip, but that gets you on the path. And then I think it takes a little bit of time to truly figure out what's really meant for my life, right? Why was I put on planet Earth?
So you've had success as an entrepreneur, and you've got this, ScaleX.ai, which is all about selling and making it simple and bringing some humanity into it. So, what is AI for sales, and how does it connect with ScaleX?
AI for Sales is a book that we wrote. I interviewed 21 different CEOs and data scientists, and it's called AI for Sales: How Artificial Intelligence is Changing Sales. It's a broader look at the industry of sales or the profession of sales. And it's 21 chapters, not just on what our piece is. Our piece is a small sliver that we've termed pipeline as a service, outsourced building a pipeline for you at scale. AI for sales is a bigger thing because it's starting to enter every piece of the selling process, from sourcing data to sending an email to what do you say to the person when you're there? How do you handle the objections? I mean, there's AI that could be on a panel right now, kind of like the Joe Biden effect.
What's
That would
that?
tell me what to say and when to say it.
Okay.
But I guess
Versus the Donald Trump effect was, I have no idea what I'm going to say, and it's just going to come out.
yeah, I'm just going to wing it. Exactly. So what's better? It depends.
Yeah. But this cognitive dissonance I'm having here, because again, AI for me just seems to be so impersonal, but you've demonstrated how you can personalize it. And now you, as an entrepreneur, are like, no, I want to really get into the person and understand what their curiosities and passions are so that they can align with whatever business they're in, whether they are going to use AI for sales or not.
Well, and then it's bigger than that. The other
Okay.
piece that I haven't shared with you is in March when I was doing puzzles. I've always been religious, right? I've got my cross under here. It's on since I got it in 8th grade from my grandparents.
I got
As
my
do you.
St. Christopher,
Excellent.
protecting me. Yep.
That's perfect. So I've truly felt that. Remember, I had the experience with dad where I was like, well, really? But I'm 100% positive that my other dad, who created the world, has my back 100% of the time. So having that level of trust, reliance, faith, I think a lot of people don't have exposure to that. And so, without being a priest or a minister in a buttoned up collar, right? Just like Nick as a pastor for entrepreneurs, I feel like there's something in my DNA that's meant to be. Now, I'm not the guy in the pulpit necessarily. I don't think I will be that person,
You're not
but
the pastor to entrepreneurs.
I'm not the pastor. That's Nick's job.
That's Nick. Yep.
But I just like I can distribute information through AI for sales process, find the right ICP, email them, voicemail drop them, call them at a low cost. Imagine deploying that engine that we built for the past 3 years towards helping people understand that there's actually a creator that gives a crap about them. That's where I can use the superpower muscle that I've been prepared to use. And I have a feeling that post election, there's something different in the world today. And it's a global thing. And there's people that are actually now open to that message, but they don't want to be sold a bill of goods by the guy on the corner. Hey, you're going to go to hell if you don't do X, Y, or Z. That's not the message I'm giving you. I'm telling you that whether you like it or not, you've got your creator is actually pulling for you. So you don't have to necessarily even know it, but I can just tell you that it's happening. Right.
So you had this epiphany, if you will, at this Litvin conference over in San Diego.
Yep.
And it was just kind of, have you heard of Landmark? Are you familiar with that whole
Yep.
program?
Yep.
I went through that, as did my family, individually back in, what was it? It was August of 2015. And that's when I realized that the ad agency that I had owned and run for 20 years was not where I was supposed to be. I had enjoyed it for 15 years. The last 5 years of it, I just didn't enjoy it. But what I did love was this idea, much like you, this curiosity around storytelling. What are the stories we're telling ourselves? Because Landmark is based so much on story, as it sounds like your experience was too. They ask you to look back and figure out what your curiosities are, what your passions are, what has derailed you. My dad was from the Midwest and very similar. When I got married to my wife, Michelle, she said, I love you to everybody. She'd say, I love you to me all the time. And I felt weird about it at first. And I go, you say, I love you to your sisters whenever they come over for dinner and leave. It's always, I love you. And what's up with that? Because in our family, we love each other, still do, but we never articulated it. And she had lost her only brother in Vietnam. And she goes, when you have a loss of that significance in your life, you realize how important it is to keep your people around you and let them know that you love them. So
Yeah.
anyways, I can totally relate to what you went through. Our folks loved us too. They just didn't articulate it very much then, but as they got older, they did. Long story short, it was this epiphany I had at Landmark, and they basically called me out as they called everyone else out in the room. It's totally up to you. If you're not happy, that's your own fault. If you got the guts to go and try something where your passion lays, you're probably going to be successful, but it may not be on your timeline. You just have to get after it. And so that's when I pivoted away from Park & Co. and have launched the business of Story in 2016. And it was growing and blowing and going for 4 years. And then COVID hit and whacked me upside the head. And I had to completely redefine what I'm doing, even asking myself, do I want to keep doing it? Long-winded way of saying the work you're doing, Chad, I think is so important, because the only thing that gets anybody through these tough times is your curiosity and your passion for what you do. It's not the financial reward. It's like, can I really help people? And can I, juice myself while I'm doing it, have fun in this process? And I believe that is what carries you through. So it sounds like you had that same sort of reckoning there, and now you are helping people do the same in their lives.
Well, and then, like I said, when I turned the keys over to the car and said, here, God, you go ahead and drive the car, when I remembered to be in the passenger seat, and now I still have my hand on the wheel a little bit, I think
And
maybe
you're eyeing the brake a little
yeah,
bit, or maybe that
I got my
accelerator,
own
say, pick it
steering
up a
wheel on
little
the right
bit.
side of the car sometimes too. But other than that, no. But ever since that, people show up in my life. Rich Blakeman is the former SVP of Miller Hyman. Remember, Alice Hyman's on my board. Rich was the senior vice president of sales for them for 8 years, the best sales org in the world. And now he's my head of strategy. And we're announcing this week he's our new chief revenue officer. So then I mentioned to you, Nick Cavuto, from a marketing perspective, has helped me massively with personal branding. We launched chadburmeister.com, and now we have a press sheet and all that stuff. Well, there's another guy that I didn't tell you about yet. Robert White is the CEO of a company called Extraordinary People. And he is one of the early people in mindset from 30, 40 years ago. Landmark, a lot of these kind of peeled from some of the companies that he was part of, ARC International. And he's done a handful where he's now graduated 1.3 million people from his courses. And he was in China for the last 7 to 8 years, and for obvious reasons has moved back to Colorado from China. He would get audience of 250 to 500 people. He was a rock star celebrity person in China. And he was able to pierce their shell and get so many people to change their lives there in amazing ways. And now he comes back after 8 years like, okay, how do I rebuild? To your point about what you're doing, how do I rebuild this business? So we've been sitting around the fire pit every Thursday. He came in, he's been there 3 or 4 times now. And the group started with me and Nick. It's grown to me, Nick +1, me, Nick +2, +3. We were at 12 people a couple weeks ago, including Robert. And at first he was kind of sitting back like, his story that he told himself, and he knows because he taught 1.3 million people to unwind this, is I'm not enough. That's the story that his mother drilled into him and that he's drilled into himself over the years. Now he's helped a lot of people realize you are. By having him to the fire pit recently, the last session, 3 or 4 in, he was leaning in and he was running the circle. And he's going to do an event with 10 people in the mountains on October 7th or so. And he's in his element. And I can see the light inside of Robert, that he's the type of person who could actually save America from the crap that we're going through right now. And I'm like, hey, at the last fire pit, I'm like, hey, just so you know, I think you might actually be one of the people who help save America. He's just like, what? And kind of shrugs it off. And then we asked him about it at the last one and said, so how, what did you do when you went into Chase and some of these other big companies? And he said, it's usually the third thing. So you've got Republicans and Democrats. You've got to make it. What is the third thing? Before, remember 9/11, that was the third thing. Now everyone's focused on, okay, we got to go do that. The third thing, the invisible China virus. Okay, but is that big? It's not working.
Yeah.
It doesn't pull people together. It's actually caused separation. So what is the third thing? And it's going to be interesting to see. I think his new book should be called The Third Thing.
Do you have any idea what the third thing is?
I'm hopeful it's not fake aliens, because there's a lot of conspiracy theory talk that says, oh yeah, watch aliens. And if you start seeing some of the leakage of, Trump in an interview with his son, Dad, are you going to expose the alien stuff? And then you see, and I'm waiting. Apparently Area 51 last week had hundreds or thousands of drones. And so can you just imagine over your city, this big fake invasion where it's like, hey, now we're the world. We're not US and China. And it's, again, I hope that's not the third thing.
That is a wacky third thing.
It's a wacky flipping third thing, man.
Hey, how does a guy get an invite to your campfire? That sounds like a really fun thing.
Yeah, anyone's welcome anytime. So yeah, I don't care if you're right, left, center. It doesn't really matter. We just like to have conversations.
Chad, this is really fascinating. Let's wrap up with a little help for any of the listeners out there. From what you've learned, someone's listening to this, what would you have them do right now to see if they are living into their most powerful story? What are the questions they should ask themselves and explore?
That's so easy for me, because it's before you go to bed at night, you just say this tiny little prayer. I thought you were going to say, let's have a prayer here, Chad. And I was like, wait, no, that's a little off the deep end. And then we're going to go with the prayer anyway. But it goes like this. It says, God, what is your will for me? I mean, it's as simple as that phrase. I probably say it more eloquently when I'm going to bed, but it's literally a sentence. And what I find happens when you can clear your mind and just say, tell me the story in my sleep tonight, right? The Bible's a lot of parables and it's stories. And I will get so many things that pop into your mind. 4 million neurons are firing throughout the night. If you invite the just say that. What do you want for me? Like, come on, just give it to me. Whatever you want, I'm going to wake up tomorrow, give it to me. When you do that, especially when you can string it together over a period of time, it just becomes abundantly obvious to where it's like, oh, got it. Okay, that's what you want me to do.
Is there a hack for the non-believer? What if they say, I'm into spirituality, or I'm into, meditation. I know there's something bigger, but I don't have a God in my life. Is there another way that you would phrase that?
Well, so there's a person that I work with that's been my coach, and he seems to be a believer in the universe. And he says to him, well, God is the universe is God. And my belief is, well, actually God holds the universe in his hand, but that's a whole other thing. But I think, I get it. It could sound foo-foo-y, like, well, wait, if I'm a non-believer, but if you just say, you don't have to say, God, what do you have for me? Or what do you want me? You just say, put it out there.
Put it
What
out there.
what
Yeah.
do you want from me? You're not saying God, just what do you think's the right thing for me? Because at the end of the day, it's not an accident that you're on planet Earth. It's just not. It's not a random series of events. It's a purposeful thing. And so if you can just ask the question, man, I'm just curious. What's the purpose of me being here? And just go to bed with that and try it for a couple of days. And if you don't get the answer, I'd be extremely surprised. It may not be the answer you're looking for, but it'll be an answer.
This is a great way to round out this show, because what has just hit me is we started with artificial intelligence and we ended on the ultimate intelligence. And you are a guy that bridges both worlds.
Yeah, that's beautiful. From AI to UI, it doesn't quite ring yet, but I'm getting there. From AI to ZI, I can
don't
see.
know.
See where it's
UI is
going.
pretty good. UI, anyways.
UI, yeah, that's actually pretty dang good.
AI to UI. See, I need to get around your campfire. I think we could have a lot of fun.
Well, you're welcome anytime, man. We do it almost every Thursday. I'd love to have you.
Chad, how can people learn more about you?
Let's see. I think the best way to really know me, because we've invested some time in this, is go to chadburmeister.com. chadburmeister.com. And it talks about a handful of these things that we've been talking about today. And someday there'll be a book called Frictionless, probably six months to a year from now.
Cool. You're in the throes of writing that, huh?
That's right.
Nice. Well, Chad, thank you so much for being on the Business of Story. Great to meet you.
You too. Thank you.
Really a fascinating conversation. And thank you all for listening to this edition. If you like what Chad had to share, then by all means, share this with your friends and family and colleagues, and think about it at night as you go to bed. Try that. What is your will for me? What is it that you want to have happen for me? And I'd be kind of curious to see what stories start emanating in your mind, and if you choose to follow those stories or not. A really, really fascinating show, one we've never covered here in over 280 some episodes of Business of Story. So Chad, so great to have you here. Also, folks, if I can be of service to you, check me out over at businessofstory.com. Certainly, if you haven't gotten your copy of Brand Bewitchery yet, you can get that on Amazon and Apple Books. And I am now in the throes of doing my audio version of it. I'm on this microphone all the time. I figured it's about time I actually record that book as well. So that'll be coming to you soon. I hope you'll join me next week when we will have another amazing story artist here like Chad. And until then, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening.